Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, SHERI Horn Hasan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, and I'm coming to you on September 8th, 2022 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. So, my usual housekeeping stuff, which always comes first, is to tell you that you can listen to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking anytime by simply going to my website at karmicevolution.com and clicking on the upper right-hand portion of the banner labeled Podcast. From there, you can scroll down the page and hear the most recent show and or search the archived listings for past shows that you might have missed or to which you'd like to listen again. And again, my apologies to anyone who's had trouble listening live for the past few weeks. I do believe that I have fixed the technological glitch that prevented that from happening, but the proof again is in the pudding. I had mentioned last week and the week before that I do call myself technologically challenged for a reason. So please bear with me, but understand that if it isn't available live, it will be available shortly thereafter. So while you are at the podcast page or on the homepage at karmicevolution.com, the podcast page is actually karmicevolution.com/astrologically-speaking. But it's simpler just to go to the homepage and click on podcast if you ask me. But then again, I'm technologically challenged, so what do I know? Anyway, while you're on the site, either the homepage or the podcast page, you'll see a downloadable freebie called How to Keep Your Sun Sign Happy. And this is some friendly advice for every sun sign from renowned evolutionary astrologer Stephen Forrest, which I gleaned from him during an interview a few years ago, that talks about what each of us, depending on what our sun sign is, needs to be actually happy. So check it out. If you download it, it will, of course, sign you up for my weekly Conversations About Consciousness Astrology newsletter, but you can also, of course, unsubscribe anytime. So be sure to grab it when you listen to this podcast, whether you do so live or after the fact, and please enjoy some of Stephen Forrest's words of astrological wisdom. Separately, you can always follow me on my Facebook page, Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, where you can keep track of upcoming podcast content and other astro news you can use. And finally, I'm offering still my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for listeners only for only $99. Now, it occurs to me, and I am very sensitive to economics, that, with the current rate of inflation and the higher prices for groceries and in some cases still for gas and other things, that I'm not raising the price on this particular reading. And that's because I do believe that astrology should be accessible to all of us. So if you are interested in astrology and want to learn more about the true meaning of your individual birth chart, which is a snapshot of where all the planets were at the exact moment and location of your birth, then this is a great deal if you'd like to use the Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading as a tool for personal soul growth. So if you want to gain greater consciousness about your soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime, if you'd like to move from chaos to clarity about what may be holding you back in areas such as relationships, your career, your finances, and or your health, a Karmic Evolution Natal Insight chart reading can lead to the understanding of and healing of old karmic wounds and help you to co-create your own future happiness and success through astrological insight. So I like to say that it's easy when you take advantage of my 1 hour, $99 discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading, again for podcast listeners only. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. You can find easy access to this offer at karmicevolution.com/karmic99. All right, so let's get on now to this week's Astro news you can use. So I want to back up and say that Mercury, transiting Mercury, entered its shadow period at 24 degrees and 22 minutes of Virgo back on August 21st. And that's when the messenger god hit the degree to which it will return on the day it stations direct again, which is October 2nd. So simply put, Mercury's shadow period starts at the degree when Mercury is still direct, at which Mercury will be when it stations direct again after its retrograde period. So its shadow period ends when Mercury reaches the degree at which he originally stationed retrograde, which in this case is 8 degrees, 55 minutes of Libra, and that will occur tomorrow on September 9th. I'm going to get into that second, and then go back to that degree or return to that degree on October 17th. So in other words, although Mercury's retrograde period spans this cycle from September 9th through October 2nd, as part of its regular 21 to 22 day retrograde period when the planet appears to be moving backwards, its shadow period technically runs from August 21st through October 17th in this particular case. Now, let me clarify that I don't actually put a lot of stock in these shadow periods, and that's because if we look, especially in the case of fast-moving Mercury, which takes only 88 days to orbit the Sun, at the accumulated time of Mercury's quote-unquote shadow period, it would last approximately 6 months out of the year. And that's a bit too much for me to be thinking I have to live as if Mercury's in retrograde that whole time. Now, likewise, for the other planets, all the other planets retrograde except for the Sun and the Moon, particularly the outer ones, and, all of them, because Mercury is the fastest moving planet, all of them retrograde for longer than Mercury. And the slowest outer planets, of course, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, retrograde for up to like 5 months a year. So their shadow periods would make their retrogrades far longer, which simply doesn't make any sense to me. I do feel, however, that often events react to upcoming energies as they are waxing in strength, even when there might not yet be a planetary sign change by transit. So I found it interesting that although Mercury doesn't technically station retrograde until tomorrow, which will happen September 9th at 8:38 p.m. Pacific time and 11:38 p.m. Eastern time at, again, 8 degrees and 55 minutes of Libra. And again, even though some believe it entered its shadow period on August 21st, we've had several events this past week close enough to Mercury's station retrograde that already seem retrograde-y. Now, I'm talking first about NASA's attempts to launch the rocket Artemis to the moon, which was first canceled on August 29th, and then again on September 3rd. As the New York Times headline put it, long-delayed moonshot delayed yet again. That was the September 3rd, the second launch delay. Now remember, Mercury's travel and transportation, and in Libra, it's attempting to be balanced. Reportedly, a fuel leak is what stymied both efforts, which certainly seems to me to reflect an imbalance in the consistent flow of fuel that the rocket ship needs to accomplish the goal of reaching its destination without running out of gas, right? So we might also note that Uranus, the planet of technology and exploring Star Trek-y type frontiers where no man has ever gone before, or let's just say hasn't gone since 1969 or the 70s, right? Since we've scrapped the moonshots long ago, that Uranus stationed retrograde several days before the first rocket launch cancellation, and that was on August 24th. Now, the next example I'd give is that of the judge, a Florida judge, granting Donald Trump's request that a special master be appointed to review the case of the documents, including those marked top secret and now reportedly top secret nuclear sensitive information taken by warrant from his Mar-a-Lago home and that legally belong to the National Archives, meaning they're government property, which in turn means they belong to you and me, the people, and not to a former president, regardless of how he views the situation. So the NBC News headline read as follows, quote, Judge grants Trump's special master request, delays parts of criminal probe, further stating, quote, the Trump-appointed judge dismantled Justice Department arguments and said the unique case called for a neutral review of documents the FBI seized at Mar-a-Lago. So I'm not going to go into the details about Trump's claim of having declassified the documents previously, meaning that he has the right to claim them as his own and retain them in his possession, other than to note that the judge's decision on September 5th, 3 days before Mercury station retrograde, is based on delaying the case due to the process of needing, according to the judge, a review. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, delay here is often the name of the game when Mercury stations retrograde. Now, the irony here, however, is that this court-ordered special master review will be reviewing what the Justice Department has already reviewed. So as we enter Mercury retrograde, a review of a review will be taking place, assuming a special master is agreed upon and begins his or her work prior to Mercury station direct on October 2nd. For my money, I'd say an argument may be made on that score between the Department of Justice and Trump's attorneys anytime, but implementation probably won't begin until at least after Mercury stations direct. And then there's that pesky shadow period, which if we choose to pay attention to it, which lasts until October 17th. So keep those dates in mind just for fun, or as an Astro friend of mine used to say, just for kicks and giggles, and we'll see what happens. Now, in any case, if we look back, we may remember that Mercury direct in Libra already exact opposed Jupiter in Aries, and Jupiter's the planet of law, among other things, on September 2nd. And while this can be an optimistic energy, it may also denote that our enthusiasm trumps our attention to detail. So as renowned astrologer Rob Hand puts it in his book Planets in Transit, and here I quote, with this transit, you often lose precision and clarity about details, so be very careful about fine points and read every word of the small print in all your dealings. Make sure that you have covered all the various angles. You can be careful and very successful if you are thorough at the same time. Avoid the temptation of thinking that the small details are beneath the lofty concerns of the day. The whole may be more than the parts, but the parts still determine the effectiveness of the whole. So just like the Artemis spaceship that needed all its parts to function properly to achieve its long-term goal, right? Now, what's interesting about this aspect is that it repeats twice more. Once while Mercury's retrograde in Libra on September 18th, and again when he's direct in Libra on October 12th. So watch for where missing details may be found or filled in on any number of scores that have to do with relationships, since while Mercury's in Libra, it's going to again oppose Jupiter in Aries, and those two are the zodiacal polarity between compromise, negotiation for the sake of partnership, and independence. So we might ask ourselves now to look back to September 2nd-ish and see if any relationship-oriented decisions were made without consideration of the long-term details, and if so, how we might need to fill in these blanks between now and mid-October. But I would also say in terms of this specific case with concerning Trump and the special master, that they will be forced to hash out details in the definition of what the special master can and cannot do that may simply almost be like, they might almost prove to, go against Trump's attorney's arguments, right? The devil, as they say, is always in the details. So as more and more details emerge. I mean, there are also the question of whether or not the DOJ can continue its investigation or has to put it on hold. And several of the pundits that I've heard of seem to incline to say that the DOJ can continue its investigation. It is simply a matter of having a special master look at all the details of all the paperwork that was found at Mar-a-Lago and to determine through discernment whether or not it qualifies for executive privilege, which of course Trump isn't entitled to. You know, you can see the confusion here, right? Anyway, and so forth. So, you know, confusion, details, etc. This is going to be the name of the game while Mercury's retrograde. However, when Mercury regresses back into Virgo on September 23rd, this begins Mercury's next annual cycle of Earth element regressions or retrogressions. So what that means is that we're moving from asking ourselves to review the meaning and quality of our relationships, air signs, as Mercury retrograded through the air signs this past year, to asking ourselves, what are the tangible resources of my life? And it's our tangible resources that provide us with our feelings of security. So Mercury's retrogrades, and this is just general information, generally follow the pattern of moving backward 3 to 4 times per year through the same element. However, since October 2020, when Mercury began to retrograde from watery Scorpio back into airy Libra, that was followed by all air element retrogrades, meaning it retrograded, you know, it's retrograding now through Libra, it went through Aquarius, and it went through Gemini, right? Until January 2022, when Mercury shifted from starting out in Aquarius and retrograded back into earthy Capricorn. Now, since then, his May retrograde period for 2022 started in Gemini and segued back into Taurus, and now he's going to begin his backward journey in Libra and move back into Virgo. So come late December, his retrograde cycles will be in the earth element solely for an entire year until he begins to move back from Capricorn to Sagittarius mid-December 2023. It's approximately a year, shifting the flavor of his future retrograde cycles to the fire element. So Mercury's backward shift from Libra to Virgo now begins our journey from the air into the earth element, and has done for most of this year, starting in earnest when Mercury retrogrades again totally in Capricorn in late December, which will call us to contemplate, as I mentioned before, the tangible results of our lives. For now, however, and for those who want to look back over the past approximately year and a half, 2 years or so, Mercury's retrograde in Libra, or the air signs in general, has attempted to connect any wisdom learned about the meaning of our relationships to the tangible results of those relationships. And here's what Jungian astrologer Aaron Sullivan says about Mercury retrogrades in the air element in general, a process, again, we're now finishing up with this current retrograde cycle. And here I quote, "The minor irritations that arise most often during the air cycle are unkept appointments, lost documents, faulty machinery, broken promises, well-intentioned but misleading information, and so on. These are the traditional signals to let go and pay attention to a greater message. The message is likely to be about time management and clarity of communication." Boy, is that an understatement or what? She continues, "Now is the opportunity to assess priorities and productivity in any given situation, coupled with revising long-term goals. This inner search enriches mere existence. As Socrates said in his defense speech to the Athenian jury, the unexamined life is not worth living." As in traditional astrology, she continues, this is probably the worst time to buy machinery such as cars, computers, telephones, or anything that might be regarded as a mechanical extension of one's mind or communication network. I'd probably add televisions and, stuff like that. However, it's a good time to research what is needed in the way of mechanical devices. Upon Mercury turning direct, one will find what one needs. Also, the old warning, try to avoid either contractual or tacit agreements unless you're prepared to accept an alternative to the original plan, or even a reversal of events upon Mercury's direction. Now, this cycle, according to Sullivan again, is best used for clearing the decks of complications and listing long-range goals. Having done so, space should be left to receive important signals from the most intelligent source, the unconscious. So often what we expect is not what transpires at the end of the retrograde cycle, but is precisely what is needed at the time. Implementing the necessary changes usually results in fewer complications when Mercury turns direct. End quote. So it pays also to mention here that Mars is currently transiting through Mercury-ruled Gemini, and that this transit, including the retrograde period of Mars in Gemini from October 30th through January 12th of 2023, will last in total until Mars enters Cancer on March 26th, 2023. Since Mars entered Gemini on August 21st, that's just, which ironically I think is around what I said was the shadow period, right, for Mercury's retrograde to begin. That's ironic, and I just realized that this very second. Anyway, since Mars entered Gemini on August 21st, that's just short of 7 full months during which Mars is disposited, as they say in traditional astrology, by the planet Mercury. That means the planet that rules the sign through which another planet is transiting. So Mars is disposited by Mercury when Mars is in a Mercury-ruled sign, meaning Gemini or Virgo. So the two are somewhat entwined now, Mars and Mercury, as we move forward through Mercury's transit, during the period up until March 26th of 2023. And then, of course, there's still Mars, the fact that as Mars has been transiting, and of course, this has been heating up before that, but, Mercury-ruled Gemini as the dispositor of Mars has led to stuff like wars on information, wars on education, so this week, as Mercury slowed, perhaps was in its shadow period, the state of Arizona allowed veterans without an education degree and others without a bachelor's degree to teach in their schools. I mean, how ironic is that, right? Talk about a war on education. To me, that's summed up by having the uneducated teach the uneducated. No disrespect to our veterans, but I mean, I suppose a veteran might be excellent at teaching street smarts or how to move instinctively and more intuitively, how to get your gun in position as a means to survive rather than through the actual building blocks such as the ABCs and the addition and subtraction necessary that leads to the ability to reason. So I would say good luck with that. But Also, so far, according to statistics released by the trade group PEN America, 1,145 book titles have been banned across the U.S. in 86 school districts in 26 states. That's like half the states in the union, no? Last time I counted, anyway. So half of the American student population, at least under the age of 18 or senior in high school, won't be taught by actual teachers who studied and practiced the art of teaching young people the basics of critical thinking, but instead replacing this current educational foundational system by being taught by warriors. Wow. So think about that for a second. I mean, unless veterans and others without education degrees are teaching kids to count guns and bullets and arrows and drones, I'm not sure what fighting has to do with educating. Do you? All right. So, meanwhile, Mars and Gemini, I just pointed out that this is something I just gathered last week. There's continued defiance against subpoenas for people like GOP candidate Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, who's turned around and sued the January 6th committee for subpoenaing him in the first place, And also today, I haven't seen the news today yet, but apparently Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's advisor and previous right-hand man, who is, if I had to assign one word to him, I'd call him an anarchist, is giving himself or turning himself in for having defied the subpoena. He's turning himself in today to New York State, which is attempting to subpoena him on the same kinds of, to get the same kinds of information for which he was pardoned by Trump on a federal level. But federal pardons don't mean that a state can't charge you with the same crime. And this has to do with fundraising for building a wall when Trump was in office and then absconding with approximately $1 million of those raised money sent in by the average Americans like you and me. So his turning himself in instead of going on the run or whatever, because Mars and Gemini too, he's, Bannon has his podcast and all he does is, talk about overthrowing and annihilating the government. Or so it seems to me, because I only see the clips that are run on other stations and cable and broadcasts and printed in the news, because I certainly don't watch or listen to his podcast. Anyway, next we turn to Mars and Gemini's theme of voting, which I mentioned last week, because Mercury's Gemini represents local neighborhoods, which of course include voting places, and Mars, of course, is taking the initiative, being independent, moving, doing something, and being ambitious, being motivated. So Mars transiting through Gemini has also declared war on purging people from voter registration logs. Now, metaphorically, that's like saying, you're dead to me. You think you're registered in the state of Montana? No, you're not. The state says you're dead. So, you're not literally, of course. But now, of course, this has been going on for a long time and is known as a Jim Crow effort dating back to the Reconstruction period after the Civil War, as well as after expanding the voting rights of black people and others due to the 1960 civil rights legislation. So again, with Mars and Gemini for the next 7 months, including its retrograde period mentioned before, that will also be in effect during both the upcoming October 25th and November 8th eclipses, but also through the November 8th midterm elections here in the U.S. So the question becomes, since Mars retrograde in a period during which, the question becomes, since Mars is retrograding, sorry, I'm falling over my words. Mars retrograde is traditionally a period during which we are tasked with finding our inner warrior who will stand up for and empower us on an individual level, whether we can move toward doing that. So further, Mars' mission, according to traditional astrology, is to support the sun and to defend and protect those weaker and less able to defend themselves. And that's what we call high Mars. So when Mars is direct in Gemini, we should be able to help, it should be able to help us all fight for those unable to fight for themselves for whatever reason, and at the same time boost our own ability to blossom into our own full potential as curious social learners. When retrograde in Gemini, it's time to review where we need to be more empowered to speak out and to analyze where any basic fundamental education, formal or otherwise, is missing, and to take a building block approach to revise plans to accomplish these goals. Of course, I will talk more about Mars retrograde when it is actually in play, or, right before. But I wanted to mention that because I wanted to say similarly, we've now got, once Mercury stations retrograde tomorrow on September 9th, 6 planets retrograde at once. And that includes Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And if we choose, we can add Chiron and the goddess asteroids Juno and Vesta to the mix. So what does that mean? It means we're extremely tied up with reviewing all things related to each of these archetypally represented energies. For example, Mercury. I just reviewed exactly what is Aaron Sullivan's advice, but we're looking at the quality of our relationships as we start to segue into the earth element retrograde periods in the future. We have been actually, like I said, the last couple of Mercury retrogrades, but it'll go solely into the earth element at the end of this year, at the end of December, when Mercury retrogrades again. But for now, it's sort of connecting the quality of our relationships and how they might connect to what makes us feel secure in terms of tangible resources. And of course, tangible resources are material possessions, our finances, our jobs, etc., our living arrangements, and trust in our relationships in general. However, they also may include, it does include, in my opinion, all those things relate to our own sense of value and self-worth. So how do our relationships factor into our sense of self-value? That's essentially where we're going with that. I think I'm going to have to sneeze, so hang on. Oh, maybe I can avoid it. All right. Now, Jupiter retrograde. The question is, are we seeking only what we think we want? Or can we recognize what it is our soul really needs during this period, which ends November 23rd, 2022? Saturn, similar to the earth element stuff, can we review what it takes to make us feel truly secure now? And are those things based solely on what we were taught, told, and or forced to believe, or our soul's true need for security? Saturn stations direct on October 22nd or 23rd, depending on your time zone. Uranus, where have our perspectives changed about what's most valuable to us? Again, you can see the theme here, right? Mercury retrograde moving back into Earth. Saturn retrograde, what makes us feel secure? Jupiter, of course, is about expansion, but it's always about expansion of consciousness. So consciousness about what it is we really need versus what it is we want. And, where have our perspectives changed about what's most valuable to us? Can we make that change and thus change some of our behaviors? And Uranus stations direct again on January 21st of 2023. Neptune's retrograde. What's true in our quest for higher spirituality? Do we believe everything we hear? Or will we check in with our intuitive voice and higher self via greater connection to the divine realm now. This is all in play. It's in play all the time, right? But, you know, again, these outer planets, especially the last three, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, retrograde for a couple of months at a time. So, you know, these lines get a bit blurred because we're really saying, you know, Neptune is the planet of higher spirituality, but the temptation with Neptune is to check out. So instead of checking out of reality in a negative way through addiction or addictive behaviors, we want to check in with our intuitive voice and our higher self, as I said just now, by establishing a greater connection to the divine realm through meditation, through chanting, through prayer, through creative endeavors, mindfulness, however we choose to do that. Now with Pluto, the question is, how can we review what's previously caused us to feel disempowered in our lives and to strive for greater self-empowerment now? Pluto stations direct on October 8th. Pluto is also the planet that really controls transformation. Pluto controls the adaptation necessary to transform so that we can survive and continue to undergo the evolutionary process. So what evolutionary process is underway in our lives now, and how can we become more conscious about that in ways that empower us? And then, of course, Chiron. I'm not going to go into the asteroid goddesses, but Chiron the question is, where have we been wounded in the past? And how can we speak out about our wounds now? It's in Aries, right? And thus draw to us those who suffer similarly, and in the process begin or continue to heal. And Chiron stations direct again on December 23rd, right before the Capricorn new moon. So more about that as we come up to that in December. So forward movement begins to occur little by little, if you look at these dates, as we weave together the different messages and enlightenments we've received between now and next January. Clearly, this corresponds with what may be a disruptive time as the Saturn-Uranus square tightens again, and is in fact tightening now at this Pisces full moon, occurring at 17 degrees 41 minutes at 2:59 a.m. Pacific and 5:59 a.m. Eastern Time on September 10th. And that's only a few hours after Mercury's station retrograde the day before. Now, full moons are always about release, and this one reminds us to release our attachment to perfectionism, something many of us seek through attempts to control our immediate environment out of a fear of chaos. Now, the fear of chaos includes many things, but the most apt metaphor is that of drowning. The Virgo-Pisces polarity often includes the Virgo archetype's fear that if it lets go, it will be overcome by a tidal wave of chaos, which can translate metaphorically into madness. So at this lunation, the Pisces moon opposes the Virgo sun, imploring it to, instead of gripping tightly to the pseudo-assurance that if there's, quote, a place for everything and everything in its place, then everything will be all right with the world, instead to let go. Going with the Piscean flow means let go and let God, goddess, source, creator, or universal energy, because doing so means we trust that such energies have our backs. The Virgo archetype tends to believe, often unconsciously, but also as often as a bottom line notion, that if it cannot control its environment, it will go mad. In reality, however, this belief often creates a highly rigid, self-critical nature which can project its energies onto others through excessive external criticism. Now, there's a fine line division between criticism and judgment, as I've learned from studying planetary and zodiacal archetypes throughout the years. So, being on the receiving end of another's criticism can make us feel judged. However, judgment per se is Saturn's domain, along with that of the sign of its rulership, Capricorn. Like Saturnian and Capricorn judgment, Mercury's Virgo in criticism tells us that no matter how critical one may be of others, those who carry a lot of Virgo energy are, sadly, often most critical of themselves. Now, the same is true with Saturn and Capricorn in terms of self-judgment, but again, there's a fine line difference between the two. So the Pisces Moon right now at this lunation begs the Virgo Sun to let go of its perfectionistic tendencies by better understanding that such tendencies are based on the need to rigidly control one's environment, but that opening up the self to a more free-flowing kind of intuitive process works better and causes far less stress in the long run. Virgo's a pro at turning thoughts into reality. So if we believe, even unconsciously, that we're going to go mad, we very well may. If, however, we believe there's a safety net for us in the form of following our dreams by letting go of such rigid beliefs, we may well have an easier time of releasing fear and embracing our intuitive nature. In other words, turning positive thoughts into reality is the way to go, but not the opposite, right? So this lunation contains also a waning T-square to the Pisces Moon opposite the Virgo Sun, because both are square to that aforementioned Mars and Gemini. Now, both luminaries have already perfected these squares, will have already perfected these squares at the lunation, but the energy of that square lingers, making both ego-oriented and emotionally driven arguments strong possibilities now. Along with Mercury station in Libra just prior to this lunation, we've got that he said, she said thing going on now, as I previously mentioned. Now, in addition, the Pisces Moon's approaching a conjunction to Neptune in Pisces, and the Moon has just passed asteroid goddess Juno of partnership, and this Pisces Moon, Moon conjunction to Neptune in Pisces exacts a little later on September 10th, the same day as the lunation, while the Virgo Sun's exact opposition doesn't occur until September 16th. So the message here is that disagreements or arguments may occur where one party believes less than provable information while the other sticks to its just the facts, ma'am, guns. Likewise, when the Sun exact opposes Neptune, we may well have a feeling of having been deceived by others, although oftentimes the Sun opposite Neptune means that we've allowed ourselves to be deceived by others, meaning that Neptune, because it's the planet of illusion, confusion, and delusion, may have us seeing things that aren't really there. And that's the derivation of the all that glitters is not gold saying. And so that fight goes on during and after this lunation, at least as it's waning, until the Libra new moon on September 25th. And that potentially short on details pesky Mercury opposite Jupiter, waning at this lunation, but coming back again on September 18th during Mercury's retrograde, may well elucidate details that formerly remained unaccounted for. Now, I mentioned that before, but I want to say too that, hang on one second. I just wanted to say that the Sun opposite Neptune can make us very compassionate and very empathic, but doing so can also open up the floodgates. So, we do have a dichotomy here, right? Which is not unusual with astrology. It's sort of like saying the lunation, the Pisces full moon, is saying let go of trying to control everything, but because the moon's waxing towards its conjunction with Neptune, it's saying, well, I believe everything, but since it'll be nearly a week later when the Sun exact opposes Neptune, it's like saying, oh, wait a minute, I believed all that stuff, and now it turns out to be BS. So there's this, again, fine line kind of dichotomy, right, between the two, because they are not, they're opposed to each other. Let go and let God, but don't believe everything you hear because you'll be disappointed. So, we all have to kind of work that out in a way for ourselves. So, meanwhile, the other thing that's happening during this lunation is that it is going to form an earthy trine from the Virgo Sun to the Taurus North Node, and a sextile to the Scorpio South Node and Hygeia. Now, I've been mentioning Hygeia for a while now, but this indicates a pretty smooth ride for achieving higher consciousness, particularly when it comes to taking care of our own health. And the sextile of the Pisces Moon to the Taurus North Node and Uranus creates opportunities to further our karmic journey's true destiny, to be healthy in our bodies by jolting us out of any lethargy now. Now, the Pisces Moon's trine to the Scorpio South Node creates a beneficial pathway towards greater understanding and empowerment. Remember, in terms with, the shorter microcosm of the overall Pluto retrograde period, right? In terms of getting to the bottom of what comprises our uniquely individual sense of spirituality, and to let that flow. And ditto for opening the lines of intuitive communication to our mind, body, and spiritual health needs now. So the sun will perfect its trine. I said the sun is the Virgo Sun's trine, the North Node. It will perfect its trine to Uranus, which is waxing at the lunation, on September 11th. And that reminds us that intuiting our, opening the lines for the intuitive communication, as I just said, between our mind, body, and spiritual health needs, can lead to greater self-discovery and understanding, and heighten our perceptiveness about a true reality, which is that all our lives are inextricably intertwined, which is something that the Pisces Moon is trying to tell the Virgo Sun through its opposition, because a full moon always has the moon reflecting the light of the sun back to itself, and in doing so it reveals some of its flaws. New moon, we got all the positives. Full moon, we see some of the flaws. Now, when the Virgo Sun quincunxes Saturn in Aquarius on September 12th, he calls us to make adjustments to our foundational friendships and group associations by thinking outside the box in ways that allow us to feel more secure without needing such a tight grip on reality all the time. And the Pisces Moon also reminds us that it's necessary to dream, at least some of the time. It's hard to dream, right, if you're always worried, right? The Virgo Moon is a worrier, and it's related to things like OCD, and that's part of that, everything in its place, right? All is right with the world if everything's clean, So it's like, how do we dream if we're busy, if the mind is busy going through all this analytical stuff? If this happens, then that might happen, and blah, blah, blah. So replacing fear, sorry, this is my home phone and I didn't turn it off. Anyway, let's ignore it. Replacing fear with positive thoughts, albeit ones that may or may not prove tangible in the long run, goes a long way to relaxing us into the kind of unclenching necessary for Virgo to succeed in its mission to maintain physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health in the long run. It's got to be a telemarketer because they never hang up, right? Anyway, the key, I should have gotten up and just picked up the phone and turned it off. Yes, I know, but whatever. I'm striving for perfection here. The key at this lunation also lies with the moon's approach to Neptune in Pisces, which I mentioned before, and the Virgo Sun's waxing opposition to Neptune, which perfects on September 16th, because the Pisces Moon is representative of the people's collective unconscious, and it increases, as I noted before, our empathy, and it strengthens our emotional connections, but it can also confuse our communication now, and that's especially true because Mercury's stationing retrograde the day before, right? So we have a recipe for miscommunication and misunderstandings to be triggered at this lunation. And again, reiterating what I'd said previously about feeling some of these energies prior to their actually being exact, even if the planets aren't in the signs that they're going to be in when the aspects do become exact. I think some of this ruling by this Florida judge on the special master issue proposed by Donald Trump's lawyers is part of that. And that happened obviously before the lunation. So when the Virgo Sun directly opposes Neptune and Pisces, again, just to add to what I said before, we're prone to kind of backing off from direct confrontations and trying to listen to our intuition. And the dilemma here, which I mentioned also, is whether or not our intuition is processing confusing or sound information. And Virgo wants just the facts. So it's best to take it all with a grain of salt and remember that our powers of discrimination are not at their height now. But that again makes it more important, especially if deception and confusion may reign, that this is a good time to take the higher spiritual route, and instead of believing everything we hear or see, to access our higher power, our authentic self, and our internal intuition from which we can process information now. So if we're completely confused, we can put it on hold, as this too shall pass. And that again is exceptionally true because of Mercury's retrograde. So when the Virgo Sun quincunxes Saturn in Aquarius September 12th, we're asked to adjust between our duties and obligations to others and our attention to self. This brings us back once again to the Pisces Full Moon's request to release worry, stress, fear, etc. that leads to the need to control our environment and to just let it go and let it flow. If we believe the universe has our back, it will. If we believe there's no such thing as a greater power, a higher power, a greater energy, beyond simply our personal will, we're likely stuck in our ego or our ego's beliefs. So the key now is to let go of that rigidly stuck traditional mindset and belief system. We're going to do it this way because it's the way we always did it. And to open ourselves up to spirit and the metaphysical notion that we're not here to be punished, but rather to live a life of joy and camaraderie with all other humans with which each of our personal energies is entwined. So before I wrap up again today, I just want to remind everyone of my Karmic Evolution Natal Insight discounted reading for 1 hour for $99. I gave all the information at the beginning of this podcast. You can, if you missed it, you signed on late, you feel free to go back, but you can access that information at karmicevolution.com/karmic99. All right, so that was a lot for today. I think that, this is going to be, like we said, a confusing time. I think that it is going to be best for all of us. I mean, I guess I'm beating a dead horse now, right? To really look beyond the empirical stuff, let go of our notice. One of the things I would say when it comes to political issues, like so many of us who would love to see people like Donald Trump behind bars, that we let go of that kind of perfectionistic thinking. The best thing in the entire world would be if with the DOJ can get him on conspiracy or this or that or tax evasion, like we don't even really care anymore, right? Just get him behind bars. But that is not necessarily the be-all, end-all, right? We have to find a way to render him impotent and so that he can do no more damage. And to me, that would be a sentence, I guess, putting the word sentence in quotes, meaning, or a legal ruling that he can never run for public office again, that he can never deceive people through fundraising efforts for fake nonprofits or through fake nonprofits and those kinds of things. I'm considering doing a webinar on Trump's wounded Jupiter and have been pondering that all this week because I think it's pretty fascinating how he's become a catalyst for the United States and the doubts and worries that have arisen concerning our legal system. So anyway, more on that hopefully anon. But for now, thank you everyone for joining me. I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week on September 15th for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of